A month from now, James Gunn's Superman will be out for the world to see. When this movie was announced, I was in community college. Now I have my bachelor's degree. And it's safe to say that I've been as hyped for this movie as I am for The Batman Part 2. And although Creature Commandos, which I do think you should watch if you haven't because it's pretty good, has already been dropped, and that's technically the first entry in this new universe, this Superman movie seems a lot more like the actual debut of the DCU. But we can't just move on to this new universe without remembering the one that came before it. The DCU was interesting, to say the least. It had some highs, it had some lows, but it was definitely an experience that you can't really forget, especially since the Snyder heads won't let you forget. So I felt that a proper way of sending off the DCU was by watching all the movies again, talking about them a little bit, and then ranking them. I feel like this is a really good way to send off this universe once and for all. So let's get started with the original movie that started it all, Man of Steel. First of all, Henry Cavill's Superman has a fire ass theme. I know it's not very Superman like, and I'm not the best person to talk about Superman themes. I haven't even seen the original Superman movies yet. I will. But I just think it's like a really badass theme. And every time I hear it, it gets me hyped. One thing I do know about Superman, though, is how he is supposed to be portrayed in the media that he is presented in. And I know this has been beaten to death time and time again, so I'm not even going to waste time with it. I'm just going to cut straight to it. Moses, not Jesus. All right, moving on. I don't like how Superman separates himself from everyone else. I guess this is similar to the Moses, not Jesus thing, but I feel like it needs to be addressed for how they portray it in the movie. A lot of times, Clark will talk like he's not like humans, which of course he's not, but he grew up in Kansas. Like he said, he bleeds red, white, and blue. There's no reason for him and Pa Kent to act like he's not just like everyone else, aside from the powers. Like, yeah, he's Kryptonian, but minus the powers, he's just like every human out there. Speaking of Pa Kent, he's dumb as fuck. I'm not going to talk about the whole, oh, don't save me because you don't want to give away your powers part. I'm going to talk about the situation right before that where Clark is like, oh, I'll go get the dog. And Pa's like, no, don't worry, I'll get it. Like, why? Why do you need to get the dog? Who's really at more risk going after the dog? You or your alien son? The thing is, if Clark gets caught in the tornado, but he acts like he doesn't, he just runs away from it after freeing the dog, they could just be like, oh, must have got lucky. That's all he has to do, and, people will just be like, lucky guy over here. And it won't be much different from anything else that's happened to him. It'll be a lot more subtle than the whole school bus thing that he did when he was a teenager. So there was no reason for him to be like, no, I'll get the dog. Moving on. Lois Lane doesn't do much in this movie besides conveniently being on the Kryptonian ship. And I know they looked through her mind to understand Superman more, but it doesn't even make sense for them to grab her specifically because they don't know her. Why would they know that she's been talking to Clark at all? They wouldn't know that. They've only known each other for like a week anyways. She barely knows anything about him. Then there's like a million out of character moments for Clark in this movie, and it's like, why would you do this instead of this? Like, he goes to talk to his pastor over his space dad, the one that knew Zod. Because think about it. He activates the ship, talks to his dad a little bit. Dad mentions Zod, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. But either way, then Zod shows up and is like, yo, turn yourself over or we're destroying the world. And he's like, damn, I don't know anything about this space guy. Hold on. I could talk to someone that, was out there in space. No, he goes to his pastor. That makes no sense. But there's like moments where he's talking about like the S on his chest and he's like, on my planet, this means hope, right? And I'm just going to be real. That's not your planet. That's where you were born, but that's not really the planet you should claim. Earth is your planet. You should be like, on the planet where my people come from. This means hope. That's a better way of saying that. Him saying on my planet disconnects him from being able to be like the humans on Earth, in my opinion. That's what Superman is supposed to be. He's supposed to be like everyone else, just with powers. Let me correct that. He's supposed to be the best of the people on Earth. There's just no reason he should say things that makes him sound alien, since he grew up around humans. He is, at least he should be in his mind, a human before an alien. At least at this point in his journey. Obviously, Prime Superman's going all across space, talking with other people, learning more about his Kryptonian heritage. But at this point, he's just becoming Superman, so he should still be way more connected to his identity as a human. And I get the whole darker vibe to the movie. That's fine, but I don't think using Zod in this way, along with the darker tone, really helps inspire hope at all. Not that it really tries to do that anyway. We just get a bunch of lines telling Clark to inspire hope and some imagery that tries to tell us that he is inspiring hope. But it doesn't really work when bro's looking edgy as hell half the time during this movie. And maybe it just has to do with the tone. I'm getting into Earth 1 comics, and this is the Batman volume, but there's also a Superman Earth 1 volume that I'm going to be getting after I finish that, and that also seems to be in a much darker tone. So I'm kind of curious to see if they also struggle to inspire hope, because, I mean, that's a huge part of Superman's character. So we'll see. If Earth 1 gets it right, then, I mean, I feel like this movie doesn't have any reason not to, especially since the Earth 1 Superman comics actually came out before this. Last nitpick. I don't know how y'all are going to feel about this, but Zod has always given me Minus from Shark Boy and Lava Girl vibes. I just always thought that was so funny. Every time I see Zod, I think of Minus. All around though, I'll say it's a solid movie. Zack Snyder is a really good director when it comes to visuals and action. That's always the entertaining part of his movies. Plus, explosions and awesome poses are like drugs to me. But I'm going to give it a C. It's an alright movie, and that's about it. It's nothing necessarily legendary, but it's an alright movie. Snyder fanboys, don't get in my comments getting all mad. If you want to get mad about anything, get mad about how I'm going to talk about the next movie. Hello, folks. It's day 2 of the DCEU rewatch, and I just finished watching Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, I believe. It was 3 hours long. It's the only one I've ever actually seen, and I'm pretty sure that's like the Ultimate Edition with all the extra things that Snyder put in that weren't in the theatrical cut. Yeah, let's get into this. First off, why did Jimmy Olsen have to die? It seems that for no reason, Jimmy Olsen was turned into a much different character than he was in the comics. Instead of being a photographer, a reporter at the Daily Planet, he was now an undercover CIA agent, when they could have easily just used some random CIA agent. And they were like, or Snyder was like, nah, let's make him Jimmy Olsen. You did not have to just kill Jimmy Olsen like that. Kryptonite randomly being in the world was way too convenient for the plot. There's no explanation for how it got here, even though Krypton is like extremely far away from Earth. And the only other alien thing from Krypton that has been on the world is that ship that had been there for, I think they said like 20,000 years, Man of Steel. So how did the kryptonite get there? I thought the easiest explanation for this would have been, oh, it broke off of the ship, or it was on the ship. But that would mean that you would find a higher concentration near the ship, and they don't really speak like that's the case. Basically, they just need an easy way to get kryptonite on the planet. Those are just nitpicks. Those aren't my real issues with this movie. Once again, there's a bunch of Jesus imagery in this movie, and look, I get it. I get why Snyder went that way. Because in real life, realistically, people would look at someone like Superman like he was some type of Jesus-type figure, like a savior amongst everyone else. But I don't like that he has Superman play into this imagery, because he should really be pushing against it, considering he grew up with humans on Earth. He's no different from them besides the powers, like I said before. And even though all these shots and poses that we get through the movie do look really cool, the fact that he allows Superman to lean into this Jesus imagery so much, it makes Superman look even more like a white savior than the concept of him already does. All right, moving on to Batman. I'm not going to speak on him killing. That's way too easy. There's been a million people that have done that since this movie came out. I want to talk more about how the mindset that this Batman is in is a lot less fitting for an older Batman. And honestly, working with other heroes for the first time is more fitting for a younger Batman as well. Because whether or not Batman is being very brutal with his villains or he's killing his villains like he's doing in this, Batman usually learns and grows through his time with the Justice League. And it really only makes sense that as Batman develops his own persona, that he learns and grows as well. This Batman's already developed his persona. He's not really going to change much about it. And considering he's in his probably 40s right now, it's going to be a lot less convincing to see him change his ways as much, simply because as people get older, they don't tend to change their ways as drastically. That's something that I always thought was a little off about this Batman, was that he was starting a Justice League when he was so old, because I didn't feel like he'd be able to adapt as much to working with these heroes simply because of his age. Nonetheless, I do like Ben Affleck's Bruce Wayne. He's stern, straight to the point. He doesn't really have much of that playboy billionaire vibe to him, but I don't really care. He's still a cool Bruce Wayne. Now let's quickly talk about the nightmare scene. This is literally just Zack Snyder's wet dream of superheroes in an apocalyptic world. It's out of place. It's unnecessary. I think using a dream to convey more of the fear that Bruce has of Superman works, but there was just too much going on in this dream. I think a shorter scene that still conveys the fear that Bruce has of Superman, combined with that flash from the future scene, would have worked just as well. Speaking of that flash scene, look, I know I just said it would have worked just as well, but it would have worked just as well in like a future movie. Having something like that in your second movie is a little bit much for audiences to take in. Next topic. Why is Lex Luthor so weird? Every time I think about Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, I think about that Jolly Rancher. That's just... And then he pisses in a cup and bombs Capitol Hill for, like, no reason. Like, despite the fact that the movie wants to make you believe that everyone would immediately blame Superman for the bombing, besides 4chan and probably Fox News, I don't think most people's first reaction would be to blame him. They would probably just be confused. Because to think that Superman would need a bomb to make a statement about his power is about as dumb as getting a reading lesson from R. Kelly. There's a lot of weird dialogue in this movie as well. So much that I mean, I wrote down a few of them, but there's a lot. What about old boy Wallace from who worked for Bruce Wayne, talking about how he's half of a man now and he can't piss while standing up? I don't know why. Think about how throughout this movie, Superman refuses to reason with Batman at any point. Instead, he plays into the authoritarian figure that Batman is trying to make him out to be by threatening him. Like, what type of dumb shit is that? Or what about when he refuses to talk to Bruce and fights him instead, even though he had literally just come from saving Lois Lane and was like, oh, I'm going to go talk to him to, get him to help me out. He didn't do that. He didn't even try. He says, Bruce, wait. And then Bruce is all fired up at this point. He's an idiot as well. He's been watching too much Fox News. But, Bruce is firing off a bunch of kryptonite shit and Superman's taking it, and he's like, all right, this guy's making me mad. He must have just forgot that his mom exists and that he needs to go save her. So he's like, all right, I guess I'll fight this guy. Like, he's an idiot. Superman is an idiot during this movie. Superman is just written to be a dumbass bully during this film. And it's so bad, it's funny, honestly. Like, the way Superman talks during this film backs up Lex and Bruce's thoughts about how dangerous someone like Superman could be, because he's not acting like Superman should act. Like, how do you expect people to believe that you're not an authoritarian type of character if you're saying shit like, I'll take you in without breaking you to Lex? Or what about the bat is dead? Consider this mercy. It's so out of character, it doesn't make any sense. Like, they were just throwing in lines to give Lex and Bruce reasons to think of him as this crazy, power crazy Kryptonian. Crazy part is this movie doesn't even have good enough action to be written so poorly. You've got the Batman warehouse scene, which is undeniably one of the greatest Batman action scenes that we've ever seen on live action. And then you got the Doomsday fight, which is also pretty good. But besides that, the rest of the action's pretty boring. Especially the titular fight, the one between Batman and Superman. That fight is probably the worst of them all. It's slow, clunky, and the whole reason that it's happening makes no sense, which makes the fight scene even worse. Just think about it for a second. The fight between the two titans of DC was boring. But like I said when reviewing Man of Steel, the movie's annoying, but there are some damn good shots that you can take from it, which is why I understand there's such a cultish following behind the Snyder movie. Some of the situations that these characters are put in during this movie are truly remarkable. For example, there's one shot during the movie where Wonder Woman restrains Doomsday with the lasso of truth. And that shit, I was looking at that and I was like, holy shit, that looks amazing. How about when Superman first meets Batman and his cape is flowing in the wind and the Batmobile is right in front of him? Another amazing shot. It just pisses me off that these shots were wasted on a pretty shitty movie. This movie is just too much. I could also talk about Wonder Woman just being a random appearance in this movie. The Justice League tease that was unnecessary. The random Steppenwolf tease that you'd see if you watched the Ultimate Edition. Literally anything to do with Martha Kent in the third act. The fact that the government tried to bomb Superman and Doomsday while he was taking him out to space. Or what about Superman fucking dying in his second appearance? It's all just too much. I'd rather just move on. Anyways, let's get this over with. Where's Batman v Superman? We're going in D tier. Only reason I'm giving a D tier over F tier is because some of the action is pretty good. It gave us one of the best Batman fight scenes of all time, and it's got some really nice shots. But the writing is just all over the place, and there's too many plot holes for this to be considered an even decent movie. This is a shitty movie. Man, Batman v Superman was so bad that I had to take a 2-day break from watching these movies. Shameful. Anyways, we're on the Suicide Squad. Forgot that Will Smith was in this. Cool. Also forgot that Margot Robbie was in this. Hot. It's kind of interesting because I think that this movie did a lot to enhance the sexualization of Harley Quinn, simply because it was Margot Robbie and the way she had her act in this movie. She was sexualized from the first episode of the Batman the Animated Series that she was in. But I guess this movie, I felt like, with her being played by Margot Robbie, took the sexualization from like here to like here. I think Batman and the Flash's inclusions here are genius, honestly. Like, it allows us to see how these villains, who may not be necessarily super powered, but are definitely more skilled than your average person, it allows us to see how they were taken down and brought in to the point where they're at being used for the Suicide Squad now. And then we also just get to see more Batman and Flash content that we hadn't seen at this point. We'd only seen Batman in one movie where he was just a straight up asshole, blaming Superman for everything. And the Flash, we get like 2 seconds through some shitty security footage. So this was just a good thing for us to see because we hadn't seen them do their normal, regular superhero activities. Don't get me started on Leto. You know what? We're going to have to talk about him. He's not a huge point of the movie, but he is a part of the movie, and I think it's necessary to talk about him. I just watched The Dark Knight about a week ago, and I realized that when it comes to the Joker, it's really important that the Joker's look and personality matches the Gotham that he's in. For example, Heath Ledger's Joker fit into the Gotham of The Dark Knight so well because he was chaotic yet calculated in a Gotham that tried so hard to keep everything under control. He was a perfect contrast to that Gotham. And the gritty tone of that Gotham allows for a much more gritty appearance of the Joker, with scars instead of just makeup creating the smile, and dirty green hair in a darker purple suit. Now, we don't know much about the DCEU Gotham at this point, or really at all. But the Joker seems to like operating in nightclub scenes a lot. And when he's portrayed in these nightclub scenes, they're usually playing some type of hip hop song. So naturally, they added a hip hop vibe to the Joker. You know, he's got the grills, he's got the face tats, which I just disagree with. But even in this environment, Jared Leto still tries to emulate a lot of what Heath Ledger was doing, which does not fit into this environment at all. His word choice at times and his fucking voice, just feels so out of place at times. Whenever he's talking in this really weird voice, I like physically cringe. Also, to reinforce the aspect that he's crazy, he just does a bunch of random shit. Like, he surrounds himself with a bunch of knives at one point. He tries to pimp Harley off to Common for some reason, and he fucking purrs. He purrs like a cat. The one thing that makes a Joker so great is that every single chaotic action that he does has at least a purpose behind it, and it helps him reach whatever goal he's trying to get to. Heath Ledger's Joker never did something that didn't help him get towards his goals. Neither did Jack Nicholson's or the animated series Joker. But this one just randomly does shit to reinforce the fact that he's insane. At some point, you're not going to feel threatened by him. You're just going to feel uncomfortable watching him do this shit. Like, he has some good parts where he does do some weird shit, but it's a part of him getting what he needs to get done. But then there's other shit, like the purring, that's just unnecessary. One thing that I really liked from this movie involving the Joker, though, was the bag of chemicals scene. Not only because it was executed well, but it really does do a good job of showcasing the relationship that Joker and Harley have. The one good thing that Joker has in this movie is the fact that he doesn't really love Harley like Harley loves him. Harley wants a full relationship with Joker, but Joker really only sees her as an asset. Still, he adores her, and that's why he jumps in the vat of chemicals after her, because even though he could do without her, he'd rather not lose her as an asset. Let's talk more about Harley and how great she is in this movie. Her crazy is driven by her love for the Joker, and that's showcased the best after she believes Joker is dead, and she's kind of just sitting on top of a car, really taking it all in. And then she, when she sees the rest of the Suicide Squad, she kind of puts back on this facade that she's still just carefree. Because most of her personality comes from the fact that she's in love with the Joker and she wants to act just like him. And I'm going to get ahead of myself talking about this a little bit, but this is a great starting point for Harley Quinn during this universe. The next movie that she's in, which is Birds of Prey, where she breaks off her reliance on the Joker, is a great next step for her. Back to this movie. Harley in this movie is the joy of everything. You get a few crack jokes from Will Smith, and you get a few crack jokes from Captain Boomerang, but Harley's really the one holding all the humor together by going around fucking with people randomly, even when they don't want to be fucked with. And she does all this with like a really blissful attitude, which keeps you from being completely pulled into the grim tone that the movie is set, which I think is good for this roster of characters. Because the characters are kind of wacky. They're not as wacky as the future Suicide Squad movie directed by James Gunn, but they're still wacky. You got Captain Boomerang, who uses a boomerang to fight and has a fetish for pink unicorns. You got Harley Quinn, of course. And you mix that in with Deadshot and El Diablo. And you mix that with a Killer Croc version that only delivers comedic one-liners. You can't go all the way into the grim tone that the movie tries to set. You need some humor to balance it out and make the movie actually feel like it knows what tone and attitude it wants to go with. Let's talk about some weird stuff. El Diablo is weird. There's no way to understand exactly why people do certain things unless they tell you. So we can only assume that the reason that El Diablo started trauma dumping when they were in that bar towards the end of the movie was because he just needed to let it out. It was a sin of his past that he couldn't really bear to deal with any longer without letting someone else hear it. Because if you don't think of it that way, it sounds like he was just like, for some reason, trying to out-villain the other villains. Right, because at first, he uses it as a way to show that him and Deadshot are different and how, oh, he kills women and children, but Deadshot doesn't. And I was thinking, why would you say that? Because saying that and then giving your backstory just makes you look like an even worse person. And then he gets a really random heroic moment at the end and turns into a CGI monster to take out one of the main villains. And then he sacrificed himself. And, you know, they try to play it emotional, but I didn't really care. There wasn't much from El Diablo in this movie until that last act. He was like, I'm done using my abilities. I'm happy dying in silence like this. And then he gets one scene in like the second act where he flames a bunch of those monsters. I think that this sacrifice and his whole turn at the end would have done much better if we focused more on his story. Allow him to develop the emotions that he has towards his past mistakes and allow that heroic moment to naturally come out of him at the end of the movie. Instead of smushing it all into that third act and it all seeming random and out of place. And poor Captain Boomerang and Killer Croc, they're just there for no reason. They have no story, no motive, and even at the end, they don't seem to get anything out of saving the world. Killer Croc gets BET, and Captain Boomerang doesn't get anything. Makes you feel bad for them. And just like in any of these movies, or any movie like at all, there's going to be plot holes because no movie is perfect. How did the two squads, once they touched ground in Midway City, split up? They saw those monsters and they were like, all right, we can't fight these things. So one squad goes around and then the other squad just fights through them. And it's like, why? If you were going to fight through the squad of monsters, they all should have just stuck together. And that other squad just ended up getting turned into more monsters. So it seems like it was just an easy way for them to, for Enchantress to get more henchmen. Speaking of Enchantress, she's pretty basic. I think the fact that she's connected to Rick Flagg's girl was a necessary thing to add at least a little bit of depth to her. But besides that, she's just a CGI villain that, you know, shoots a beam into the sky and wants to destroy the whole world. She doesn't even try to make any type of connection with the members of the Suicide Squad, which kind of sucks because they were both imprisoned by the government. And I think using that more to fuel why they should join her side. Instead, she just tries to show that she can fulfill whatever wish they want, which that's also really basic. Also, I didn't write this in the script, so I'm just going to talk about it real quick. Viola Davis always plays Amanda Waller really well. This is no different. Waller is cold, calculated, doesn't really care about anyone besides herself. And it shows here as well. Honestly, I enjoyed this movie a lot more than I had in the past, even though I think I had only seen this movie once before. So maybe this is just me watching it for a second time, but I enjoyed it. I still do think that Man of Steel is better, so I'm going to put it right behind Man of Steel in C tier. All right, Wonder Woman. The last movie before everything went to shit. At least it was a good movie. I don't have much to say about this movie, but I'll still yap a bit. I haven't seen most of these movies since I was in high school, and I guess since I'm older, I look at movies a little differently. And I noticed that Diana and Steve Trevor's dynamic throughout this movie is just Steve being awkward about certain taboo topics when speaking to the naive and innocent Diana. And it's funny and all, but some scenes just make you think that the writers were really just fulfilling some weird fantasy kink that they had going on. Outside of that, I can't really help but laugh at the fish out of water experience that Diana has. It's a really simple trope, but I guess I'm a sucker for simplicity. And even though there's comedy to it, I think there's also moments where the trope does really well at picking apart the evils of the world as they're shown to Diana, whether it be the obvious evils such as war or some not so obvious ones that are kind of buried, like misogyny or colonization. And not to get too political, but I think this part of her understanding the world is a big part of her story in this movie, simply because if you think about it, her whole belief that Ares is behind the war stems from her beliefs on the world while she lived in Themyscira. But when she comes to the world, she starts feeling differently about it. Especially love the fact that her learning about the horrors of the world is a big point of why she actually ends up almost giving up on the world at the end. As Diana says, she comes from a place where generals are usually at the front of the line fighting with their troops. But in the real world, they're sitting in closed offices far from the battlefield. And she doesn't really respect that at all. And I'm not going to go too deep into every single issue that really gets called out in this movie, but there's a bunch of them that are subtly hinted at as well. And I just like that none of these issues are justified in any manner. They're just displayed to Diana. This movie has great action scenes as well. Probably the best so far. And I'm saying that in a general view because I still think that the Batman warehouse scene is one of the best action scenes ever like put together. But Wonder Woman in general has maybe the best action scenes out of any of the movies so far. And Steve Trevor has one of my favorite death scenes of all time because all Steve Trevor wanted to do was make a difference in the war and help end it. And if that means he has to sacrifice his life, he'll do it. So when he's up in the plane and he's preparing to shoot the gas so that it doesn't drop on any more towns, he smiles because he's making a difference in the war. So yeah, Wonder Woman has a lot of good things, but one thing I do not like is the Ares twist. Not necessarily that Ares exists within this movie, but the way that it is executed. I get if they didn't want to make Ludendorff Ares because they didn't want to make a real historical person, like an ultra god villain, but having it be Sir Patrick Morgan, someone on the Allies side who had no inclination of being evil beforehand, that was unnecessary and it throws off the plot completely. Okay, actually, Patrick Morgan might actually be a real person too. I actually just looked it up. He might be real. There's someone who was a corporal in the British Army named Patrick Morgan. I'm not good with army terms. I don't know if that is similar to what the Patrick Morgan in the movie was, but if this is the Patrick Morgan that they're referencing, that makes it even worse for why they chose him. Whatever. A big part of the movie was Diana learning about the real world, as I just talked about. And it seemed like part of that was realizing that whether or not Ares was real, the war wasn't going to stop with him. And that some people were just like that. Some people just wanted this war. And that this war was just caused by people. And I felt that it would have been a really good stepping point for Diana in coming to terms with her view on the world, because she'd have to challenge her beliefs that she came to the world with. Because having Ares' death just magically end the war reinforces her ideals that the movie tried so hard to pick apart. There's the whole talk with Steve right before Ares is revealed where he's saying, maybe some people are just like that. Maybe we don't deserve your good. And it feels like he's just giving her a reality check just for all of that to be thrown out the window when Ares turns out to be, actually a part of the war and he ends the war. Not to nitpick too much either, but it also feels like if killing Ares would have just ended the war like it did in the movie, then Steve Trevor's death was unnecessary. I do think that making Ludendorff Ares would have been much better because it takes away an unnecessary twist in the movie. But whether or not you keep Sir Patrick Morgan as Ares or you make Ludendorff Ares, I think the final battle plays out the same. But when Ares dies, the war doesn't just immediately end with everyone stopping the fight like they portrayed in the movie. I think what his death should do is give the Allies the push they need to bring peace and end the war. Because as Ares says in the movie, he didn't cause World War I. So it makes no sense that his death would end World War I. It really feels like they just wanted to shove in that Ares' death would end the war, but for some reason they didn't want to fully commit to it, so they end up with this, oh, I didn't cause the war, but I can end it type of scenario, which is just, I feel like it's doing too much. I guess I did have a lot to say about this movie. Anyways, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I just think there's some plot points that really could have been fixed, and it would have been a much more, I guess, consistent movie. Wonder Woman is going in B tier.
Everybody knows.
All right, So I watched 3 movies yesterday, and last one that I watched was Justice League. This one I wrote significantly less about, probably because I was tired and exhausted, but I'll try and expand on what I wrote here. For starters, I'm going to try and only talk about the parts of the movie where Josh Whedon edited it. But they do have the same story at its core. I actually think the opening Batman scene is cool, simply because it allows Batman to have a lot more to do in these movies besides just getting together the Justice League, because he doesn't really do much action-packed in either the Snyder Cut or this movie. And most of the time when he's fighting parademons, he looks like a helpless old man. So this scene allows him to show that he's still Batman, and he's agile, he's smart, he's calculated, and he is able to do all the things that Batman normally does. It's really odd in this movie how if you've seen the Snyder Cut, you can pick out the exact scenes where Josh Whedon maybe added in another camera shot, and it makes them seem even more out of place, in my opinion. Steppenwolf's design is so bad and so non-threatening that I think I could beat his ass. He looks like a single dad, and he sounds like Smokey the Bear, which just makes me want him to talk less. But he talks a lot. Speaking of his voice, there's this really weird spot. There's this really weird moment in the movie where he makes it to the abandoned town with all of his parademons, and he tells them to go find the other mother boxes, and he says, I think for the Unity, and then he says for Darkseid, which, first of all, that for Darkseid is completely out of place considering there's no other mention of Darkseid in the movie. And then on top of that, the voice that says for Darkseid isn't the voice of the Steppenwolf in this movie. It's the voice of the Steppenwolf from the Snyder Cut. They didn't seem to want to edit that voice and make it sound more like the Steppenwolf from this movie for some reason. So it's completely out of place. I didn't notice this before, but that's probably because I've only seen this movie like once before. But there's too large of an emphasis on Barry having a crush on Diana. Like on top of the hi Barry, I'm Diana scene, and then him falling on top of her. There's also this really weird part where when Cyborg first joins the others on the rooftop, and Wonder Woman smiles at him. And then there's like a 2-second shot of Barry looking at her with a bit of jealousy for some reason. Unnecessary. And I think that bridges me into the biggest point. There's too much humor in this. One thing that Josh Whedon did to this movie was he tried to make it like the MCU. When you try to emulate, the plot of this movie is one of impending doom that our heroes aren't too confident about being able to beat, yet there's a bunch of humor thrown into it that makes us seem to forget that our heroes are unsure of what to do next. It's not like an Avengers movie where the Avengers are fairly confident in themselves and they know that they'll be able to beat the villain, so they crack jokes because they know in the end they'll come out on top. These heroes don't know if they'll come out on top. They're just hoping for the best. So that type of humor doesn't work here, especially with the whole we need Superman thing that both movies emphasize, which I really dislike. I actually don't think this team, this Justice League, would need Superman to take down Steppenwolf, but they seem to be depowered just so they can say we need Superman. Especially Wonder Woman, who takes on Steppenwolf one-on-one a bunch of times. And look, Wonder Woman can handle Steppenwolf if she stopped trying to slice at his armor and maybe at his face or any of the other exposed parts of his body. Also, to add on top of the whole trying to make the Justice League into the Avengers talk, Batman becomes an asshole for no reason to shame Diana for not being in the public eye. And he starts mocking Steve Trevor. It's like, why? Oh yeah, because Tony did the same thing in the first Avengers. I don't know if we didn't just like came in with like the Avengers script in hand and then just started looking at it and was like picking shit from it. But that wasn't a good idea. He became an asshole for no reason, and then later on Diana just kind of forgives him, and it's like, no, he doesn't deserve forgiveness. And then Aquaman does the same shit, accusing Cyborg of being on Steppenwolf's side for no reason. There's not even a justified reason for Batman being an asshole, like he did have in Batman v Superman. Superman versus the Justice League fight was cool and all. I think my favorite parts were probably Superman seeing the Flash in slow motion, and then also Batman getting bitch smacked. Because let's be real, he deserved it. Like, I actually started like dying laughing when I saw that. It was great karma. Also, Lois being dumb, as always. I guess I don't know why her character's always doing dumb shit, but calling Superman by his government name in front of a bunch of cops, his government name actually doxed him. Like within like 2 hours, everyone would know who Superman is. Also, having Steppenwolf get beaten by his own parademons at the end is really anticlimactic because we saw the Justice League, well, at least everyone besides Superman, get their asses beat by him, and it would have been a lot more satisfying if we saw them beat his ass. Obviously, we get Wonder Woman cracking his sword, but besides that, we don't really get anything from the other heroes. So it's like, that's pretty anticlimactic. Like, we see the entire Justice League besides Superman get their asses beat by him all movie. And they don't even get to get their payback. They let the parademons do it, which is lame. Yeah, this movie isn't terrible. It's also not good. And maybe it's because this was the third movie that I watched that day. I didn't really see that many plot holes besides the things that I just think could have been executed better. But still, seeing this after watching the Snyder Cut, it really hurts this movie a lot. This movie is, I don't mean to sound like a Snyder head, but this movie is significantly worse. But that doesn't mean it's bad. It really is just an average movie in my opinion. Justice League is also getting a C tier grade, but it's going to be behind Suicide Squad and Man of Steel. All right, so quick little interruption. I started watching the movies and I started recording me talking about my thoughts about each movie. And I realized that this video might be 2 hours long if I end up taking every single movie and compiling it into one video. So I decided I'd break it up. So this is part one, which is basically the Snyder era. It's got all the movies that were released when he was still at the helm, and then the Justice League, which was the start of the downfall. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed part one of this. I plan on having 2 more parts of this for the rest of the movies, and then Superman should be out by then. So stay tuned for part 2 and part 3. They're coming, and as always, thanks for watching.